Today's video examines a major development that could reshape the political, legal, and humanitarian landscape of one of the world's most contested territories, the occupied West Bank. On February 9, 2026, the Israeli Security Cabinet approved a series of sweeping measures to expand its powers in the occupied West Bank, including changes to land laws, enforcement authority, and the legal framework governing settlers and Palestinians. In this video, we will analyze the factual details of the decision, the historical and geopolitical background, the legal framework under international law, the reactions from Palestinians, regional states, and the international community, the broader regional and humanitarian implications. Let's begin with the facts. The Security Cabinet of Israel approved new measures that will make it easier for Israeli settlers to buy land in the occupied West Bank, including removing long-standing restrictions that prevented private land purchases by Jewish citizens. Expand Israeli administrative and enforcement powers over Palestinians even in areas previously under the nominal authority of the Palestinian Authority, PA. Transfer planning and regulatory responsibilities in key areas, such as Hebron from Palestinian municipal control to the Israeli civil administration. Ease access to land registries and declassify previously confidential records to facilitate land transactions. Re-establish a dormant land acquisition commission to enable land purchases for settlement development. According to Israeli officials, these measures are intended to simplify administrative processes and increase transparency in land transactions, while defenders of the policy see it as a reaffirmation of Israeli sovereignty. But critics argue these steps go far beyond bureaucratic reform. They amount to a de facto annexation of territory that Palestinians claim for a future independent state. This is where both the legal analysis and the political consequences become crucial to understanding the gravity of the decision. To understand the significance, we must place this development in its historical and geopolitical context. The West Bank has been under Israeli occupation since 1967, when Israeli forces captured the territory during the Six-Day War. Since then, the land has been governed through a combination of military orders, administrative regulations, and civil policy decisions that distinguish between Israeli settlers and Palestinian residents. Under the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, agreements signed between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, the West Bank was divided into areas A, B, and C, each with different degrees of Palestinian and Israeli control. Despite this, settlement expansion has continued, and the presence of hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers has become entrenched. The Israeli government's coalition in recent years, particularly under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with strong influence from far-right leaders, such as Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, has openly promoted policies that consolidate control over the West Bank. Smotrich has previously stated goals that effectively undermine the feasibility of a Palestinian state by expanding settlement footprints. This approach reflects a broader ideological shift among influential figures in Israeli politics who reject the traditional two-state solution, arguing instead for permanent Israeli sovereignty over the territory. Observers have even described this trajectory as evolving toward a fragmented system, sometimes called a four-state solution, where Palestinian governance exists in isolated zones under Israeli overarching control. From a legal perspective, the situation raises serious international law questions. Under the Fourth Geneva Convention, an occupying power is prohibited from transferring its own civilian population into occupied territory or altering the legal status of the land in a way that affects the rights of the occupied population. The UN Security Council Resolution 2334, 2016, reaffirmed that Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank has no legal validity and is a violation of international law. Despite these international norms, the new Israeli measures directly facilitate actions that critics argue institutionalize further settlement expansion and diminish Palestinian sovereignty. These include repealing laws that prevent Jewish individuals from buying West Bank land and extending Israeli administrative authority into areas that had limited Palestinian control. Additionally, the decision weakens the role of the Palestinian Authority, which has been the interim administrative body in certain areas under the Oslo framework. Measures that extend Israeli enforcement powers in Areas A and B effectively erode one of the core features of negotiated self-governance. Legal scholars argue these policies violate UN Security Council resolutions that protect Palestinian territorial rights, the Fourth Geneva Convention's prohibitions on settlement and land confiscation, the spirit, if not the letter, of previous bilateral governance agreements between Israel and the Palestinian leadership. This legal assessment sets the foundation for understanding the widespread global and regional response. The reactions have been swift and wide-ranging. Palestinian leadership, including President Mahmoud Abbas and the PA, condemned the new measures as illegal and tantamount to de facto annexation, urging urgent intervention by the United Nations Security Council and the United States to halt what they describe as a dangerous escalation. Hamas and other Palestinian factions have called the measures an existential threat, with statements asserting that these steps deepen the occupation and displace Palestinians from their land. Arab and Muslim-majority countries, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Indonesia, Pakistan, Qatar, and Turkey issued joint condemnation, describing the decision as an illegal annexation attempt that undermines peace prospects, violates international law, and threatens stability across the region. The European Union has also criticized the move, calling it another step in the wrong direction that erodes confidence in negotiated solutions and peace efforts. Even internationally, the broad consensus in diplomatic circles remains that the West Bank status should be resolved through negotiation, with respect for international law and the rights of both peoples. Yet, the United States, Israel's closest ally, has not publicly halted the measures, although some voices in Washington expressed concern about the implications for peace efforts. This decision has profound geopolitical consequences. One, peace process undermine the West Bank measures make any return to a two-state negotiation framework more difficult. By effectively embedding Israeli civil and land law into more of the territory, the legal and physical barriers to Palestinian self-determination grow. 2. Increased tensions and violence. The expansion of settlement rights and enforcement power is likely to fuel further clashes between settlers and Palestinians, as well as protests and civil resistance. Human rights groups warn that expanding settler presence often correlates with increased violence and dispossession. 3. Regional stability at risk. Arab states have linked Israel's normalization with some members of the Arab League to progress toward a Palestinian state. Moves perceived as annexation may delay or complicate broader regional cooperation frameworks that rely on a negotiated solution. 4. Legal precedents. The legal shift represents a broader pattern of redefining occupation rules in practice, favoring de facto sovereignty over negotiated peace, and could set a precedent for other contested territories globally. Independent assessment facts tell us this is not an isolated administrative decision, but a strategic legal reconfiguration of how the territory will be governed. Israeli officials argue the changes improve transparency and streamline administrative processes. But critics point out that the same bureaucratic language masks a strategic consolidation of territorial control that effectively entrenches occupation and erodes Palestinian governance. International law does not support the unilateral alteration of a territory's legal and civil status during occupation. The broad global response from Arab states to the EU reflects this legal consensus. This move, therefore, represents a turning point, one that international actors must address not just politically, but through legal accountability mechanisms. Public impact. For Palestinians in the West Bank, greater vulnerability to land loss, reduced ability to shape local governance, intensified risk of displacement. For Israeli civilians and settlers, potential expansion of settlement infrastructure, greater integration of occupied areas into Israeli civil law. for the region. Increased diplomatic tension. Strain on peace negotiations. Heightened risk of wider conflict. This is far more than an administrative measure. It is a structural shift with lasting consequences for Palestinian rights and sovereignty, international law norms, regional peace and stability. Understanding these developments requires legal clarity, historical awareness, and geopolitical insight, precisely why today's decision has attracted worldwide attention and debate. I'm Noor Fatima, and this has been an independent legal and geopolitical analysis. Stay informed and join the discussion. What do you think these measures mean for the future of the West Bank, for the Palestinian people, and for regional stability? Comment below.